but if you're in any doubt which side they're on, I've been working with local firms on the Safe and Effective programme. We met a lot of vaccine injured people. They are physically injured, they're mentally injured, and even worse is the frustration of not being recognised and helped by the NHS, or believed, they get accused of being mentally ill. So, to support each other, they form self-help groups. Facebook, banned with misinformation. So what they tried to do then was hide it by using emojis of a carrot instead of the syringe and other emojis. BBC spotted it and boasted in public, on air and in their website, that we've spotted this. It's disinformation. We have told our big tech partners, and it is being banned. How would they feel if it was the Samaritans that they closed down? Because there's no difference. These self-help groups are keeping each other alive. This is your BBC. This is what you're paying the taxpayers money for. The media, I don't think it's been censored. In my opinion, it's been controlled. Thank you.
Mark mentioned something called nudge, which David Charanambas, I'm sure, is going to talk about. David is very much not in the government camp, so he is going to present his case as a fictitious character called James Block from the BIT, and I'll leave David to explain what BIT is.
Hello, good evening all. Now, it is a disappointment that we couldn't get anyone to really be pro-narrative, but it's not surprising. I challenged hundreds of doctors and scientists on all forms of social media, unlikely to have a debate with myself or any of the scientists and academics that I consult to, and zero. A big fat zero acceptance. And if they were so keen that they were correct and the information was so true, then surely they would want to share that. So what we're seeing is a one-way movement of information, which is very problematic. We have doctors tweeting, they're able to just tweet whatever they want and hide behind the keyboard, and anything that they agree with is supported. If they're pro-narrative, and the other side is shut down. Debate's not easy, debate's not comfortable, but it's important. It's important to talk to those that don't agree with you. So on our project at Reaching People, reachingpeople.net, we have role plays, and we play Jane and Joe Bloggs, and I'm going to play James Blogg tonight. And Joe Blogg, what we ask people to do is to step into Joe's shoes and to pretend to be pro-narrative. And people are absolutely shocked how easy it is to be pro-narrative. Because there is a buffet of excuses there. There is an absolute wealth of information. At the first level you can go, oh, blah, 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 and then you just, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're one of those. And it's only when you go to the second level, when you start to really question things, that you get to the truth. This is why debate's important, and this is why it's completely shut down. So tonight I'm James Blogg. And this is a Chomsky quote, and I think Chomsky should probably read some of his own books, judging by his actions in 2022. But he did say, when he was really in his prime, if we don't believe in freedom of expression for people we despise, we don't believe in it at all. So I'm James Blogg, and I'm from the BIT. What is the BIT? It's the Behavioural Insights team. What do? They use behavioural science to influence the public. It's cool, isn't it? I don't know about the ethics. Okay, so there's a document called Mindspace, and you can Google Mindspace. You just type, well, not that you want to use Google, but maybe for this. Type in Mindspace government, you get a 90-page document on how the government gives to all its departments on how to influence the public, influencing behaviour through public policy. The 9 top ways that we can influence the public to comply. One of them is ego. They Here you go. On page 66, we say, the public won't be happy if they find out about it, but hey, for the greater good. On page 67, we talk about actually moving people's identity. Yes, that is possible, if people aren't really critically thinking. Remember the pattern to the sky? That was probably us. I had my XYZ on the profile pictures. That was us. That was actually used by China in the prisoner of war camps. Very effective. Well, it's for the greater good. The toilet rolls. That was probably us. Scarcity drives up demand. So every single product that came out for the last 2 years was in short supply, wasn't it? But that's important because it was important to get compliance. And if you bought more than you want, that was probably us as well. Intellectual freedom is the right of every individual to seek and receive information from all points of views with restriction. Yes. But I think if you fact check that, you'll probably find it's false. So what is censorship? It's really individual groups or governments deciding what information is objectable or dangerous. And I think Mike alluded to it, but in the UK there isn't actually a specific law that free speech exists as a fundamental right, or so says Wikipedia. I'm sure we can trust those guys. But as of 2022, Britain is ranked 35th on the Press Freedom Index. 35th. Well, there's 200 countries, so it's not too bad, right? So censorship. Censorship really is a blunt instrument. Okay? But with the BIT, it can become more of a scalpel. And really in censorship, there's 3 rules. The state doesn't get to call the shots. Okay? And anyone that says they are, that's just a conspiracy theory. Freedom comes first. I mean, just look at the glorious comrades such as Trudeau. And only censor, so limit or prevent harm. Yeah, we obviously don't want to harm corporate profits. So there's different types of censorship. One of the most important is actually self-censorship. And we don't realise how pervasive it is. When you get censored on Facebook or anyone else numerous times, you will sometimes think twice about some of the things you say. So we will tend to self-censor. And as Richard Werner, who's been censored more than most, he's an economics professor, the Bank of Japan used to send media, or still do, send all the media to the economics. And if anyone speaks out, they don't get invited next year. So all the media self-censors around finance. So anything that doesn't follow the party line, you won't see. Censorship is also via influence. And Sharon Atkinson, in a really fantastic book, Slanted, showed that there was a couple of Boeing employees that approached her. And they said, Boeing's safety department are cutting corners. Huge story. She prepares it, it's going out Monday. Boeing lean on CBS and they stop the story. Then 2 aircraft fall out of the sky, linked to that safety department. And that's the effect of the influence of big business on censorship. But then you've got the real main one that we're talking about tonight, that's policy response, and that's Ofcom and fact checkers and everything else. But we're proposing that we kind of need those. And of course, no one in the cult ever thinks they're in the cult. So, on to Mark Zuckerberg, he says that we err on the side of greater expression when it comes to censorship, and we remove content effectively. And we certainly do that. So there's really one important point that I think is really overlooked, and that is that Karl Popper argued that there is an asymmetry between falsification and verifiability. Now that sounds quite complex, and it is complex, but let's put it into a simple story. Let's say that my scientific theory is that there's no squirrels in my park. Okay? And I send 100 people there with cameras. They can be trusted, it's all monitored. They come back. 2 people have spotted squirrels in the park. Are there squirrels in the park? Yes. But if I censor those 2 people, there's no squirrels in the park. And 98% of people agreed. you see. It's about the amount of nodding dogs that we've got. And people go, so every single person is in on this? They don't have to be. Censorship removes exclusions. So Voltaire said, if I can make you believe absurdities, then you commit atrocities. And that's why we really need censorship, to make sure that those absurdities are not put into people. So then the key really is that the foxes are not guarding the hen house. And I think that's up for people to decide who is guarding, who are the gatekeepers of information. So our proposal, well, laughably, is that there is no censorship, which I think is very hard to justify. But I think the real question is, can we justify the censorship that goes on? And I think that's what we're proposing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed, or James Brooks, I should say. And now I turn to Matt Letizier, who needs no introduction. And when I was giving out leaflets for tonight's event in Chelsea and putting them through letterboxes, and many people came up to me and said, oh, I know Matt Letizier. He's the legend of Southampton. So I don't need to introduce him. Over to you. Thank you very much.
This is not my usual arena, so forgive me if I stutter a little bit. I'd like to take you a little bit through my journey over the last 2.5 years. I was never anybody who was politically minded at all, never really interested in politics throughout my entire life. That all changed in March of 2020 when the government started to decide that I can't leave my house. And I started to question why. And there were some things that just didn't add up for me. Very early on in all of this, there was evidence from the Diamond Princess cruise ship that told everybody that this disease was only going to be really dangerous to people. Completely wreck our economy, our lives, with all the problems that that's going to entail down the line. We know what those are entailing because we're living through them right at this minute in time. And I decided early on that I wasn't going to shut up, and I was going to have my voice. And I soon found out that going against the government narrative came with it a lot of use. Now, when I first started tweeting about what was going on, I received a heck of a lot of abuse from what I thought were everyday people in the country. And I'm guessing some of those were, but it was only later on that I realised, I did a little bit of digging about the 77th Brigade and the bot farms that you get on social media, who are used to sway the narrative, to persuade people that everybody thinks this way, and I kind of realised pretty soon after that a lot of the stuff, and I stopped looking at the replies to my tweets. I would just drop them on and then walk away. I found that very effective for my mental health, and I also found after about 2 weeks of the first lockdown, the greatest thing that I ever did for me, my wife and my daughter in my house was I switched off the television. I only watched sports programs, and then, sure enough, before too long, it was infiltrated sports programs. I had to sit there and watch footballers take a knee before football matches. And I spoke out about that as well. And that came, again, with another form of abuse, because I refused to wear the black lives matter. And also found that very effective for my mental health. And that came, again, with another form of abuse, because I refused to wear the black lives matter. And also found that very effective for my mental health. And that came, again, with another form of abuse, because I refused to wear the black lives matter. And also found that very effective for my mental health. And that came, again, with another form of abuse, because I refused to wear the black lives matter. And also found that very effective for my mental health. And that came, again, with another form of abuse, because I refused to wear the black lives matter. And also found that very effective for my mental health. And that came, again, with another form of abuse, because I refused to wear the black lives matter. And also found that very effective for my mental health. And that came, again, with another form of abuse, because I refused to wear the black lives matter. And also found that very effective for my mental health. And that came, again, with another form of abuse, because I refused to wear the black lives matter. And also found that very effec actually sit back and say nothing. I knew the consequences. I had a couple of warnings from Sky due to things that I tweeted going against the government narrative. So I kind of knew what was coming, and still, it was too important to me to not say anything and keep my job. Quite frankly, if I had to do the same thing again, I would do it, knowing the consequences now, and I feel a lot better actually as an individual that I don't have to rely on the mainstream media for my income for my family. So that is a bit of a blessing in disguise. But it hasn't stopped the frustration of what I've seen going on around the world. And in those press conferences in the early days, when I kind of knew what was going on, I'm just a thick old footballer, and yet I was able to go decipher what was happening. I was able to look at those videos of the people in China falling over in the street, supposedly dead from COVID in a split second. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else do that, actually. Apart from on a sports field, when they have vaccines. But that is a completely separate subject. But what frustrated me was watching our media in the press conferences, nobody challenging what the government was doing. In fact, not only are they not challenging, they're actually encouraging the government to lock us down for longer, lock us down for harder, and I cannot tell you how much good it did me to turn the television off after those things. It really was quite remarkable. Now, all of this time, what people seem to forget, and what no journalist ever mentioned in those press conferences, is that it's about 3 days before we had our first lockdown, was that our government had classified this and taken it off the list of being a high consequence infectious disease. Now, they knew that it wasn't as deadly as they were telling us. They lied to us, and I do not ever want to hear that phrase that I heard just now, for the greater good, ever again in my life, because that has been the motto of every tyrannical government around the world that ever came in. So, for the greater good doesn't wash with me. I always think that the individual will always be far more powerful than the collective, because without the individual, you don't have it. And they have probably the most important thing that I was able to start seeing. I thought the way they went about things were disgusting, really, if I'm honest. The coercion, the bullying, the mental, if you don't do this, you can kill your granny. If you leave your house, everyone's going to die. I just thought that was the most inhumane thing I've ever seen. And these are the reasons why I've had to keep speaking out about the issues that have come up. Those issues started with the COVID stuff, with the BLM stuff. And then we moved on to the vaccine, which, as a layperson, full disclosure, I've had every childhood vaccine in my life. I took the flu vaccine until I was about 28, and then I had a bit of a bad reaction to it one year, so I never took it again. That was about 25 years ago. And I probably say my hand on the heart, the last 25 years, I haven't had the flu again. So what these people have managed to do to me, as an individual who had trust in the medical professions, who had trust in government, who had trust in the legal professions, what this has done to me the last 2.5 years is taken away every single bit of trust I had in people. If somebody calls me an anti-vaxxer, I'll probably go, come on, I'll get out now. Because of the lies, because of the research that I've now done, which I've never done before. I looked into the HPV vaccine. My daughter's 13 years of age, was offered this vaccine. That's been binned that because of advice that I've taken from people who aren't involved in the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that's the one thing I've kind of learned over the last couple of years as well, is that when you're listening to, it's very difficult to disseminate who is telling the truth or not, and what is the truth. And for me, what I've learned to do is not just listen to what people have got to say, but also try and find out what conflicts of interest they've got when they're saying it, because we don't get told that. See, I believe if anybody is going on television and they're giving advice to the general public, I think, just like the footballers and their sponsors across the front of their shirt, anybody who's going to go on the television needs to let everybody know where their conflicts of interest lie, who funds them, and then we can then make up our own mind as people, as citizens of this country. We can make up our own mind whether or not we trust you, given what we know about your conflicts of interest. I think that's a really important thing. And there is censorship, without any shadow of a doubt. I was listening to Talk Sport one morning, the day after another footballer collapsed on the pitch clutching his heart. And during the Jim White show, Trevor Sinclair and Simon Jordan both expressed an opinion that they thought there needed to be some kind of investigation because these players are collapsing on the field to play, and nobody seems too bothered about it. I was a professional footballer for 17 years, hand on my heart, I never saw one player in my entire career in 17 years, and that's not just matches, I'm talking about training 5 days a week for 17 years. Not one player did I see with a heart problem. Not one. Now, all these players are collapsing on the pitch. Trevor Sinclair happens to bring up the subject and questions why nobody is being interested in investigating this. Halfway through his sentence, his microphone got cut off. Live, on air, microphone cut, he was not allowed to speak about that subject anymore. Now that is irrefutable evidence that there is censorship, and that censorship would have come from Ofcom, and if you don't think that the government has told them to do that, I'm sorry, you're living on a different planet. The media have been so complicit in all of this. I believe they're controlled by the same entities that control our government. I don't think there's any difference whatsoever. I think you can see that by the fact that they have pretty much all of them, apart from GB News, all of them, of the mainstream media, have shunned every single person that has been injured or died of this vaccine. Every single one. None of them can get a slot on BBC or ITV to tell their story about what they're, and these people are heard. I've sat in a meeting this afternoon at Parliament at the Lord Palace House where Dr. Asina was giving a presentation, and in amongst the crowd were a lot of the vaccine injured. And these people are crying out for some help and just to be noticed, and our media have completely turned their back on them. I spoke to Lisa Shaw, who worked for the BBC, one of their own. She died last May, and it is now October 2022. She died May 2021. I spoke to her husband today. Despite the fact that the vaccine manufacturer is on her death certificate, despite that fact, they still won't pay him out from the vaccine compensation scheme. Absolutely disgusting. This is, and it appears that the tactics from these people are that we will stretch it out as far as we can and hope people get fed up and keep badgering us for the £120,000. I'm sorry, that's not good enough in this day and age, and quite frankly, the media in this country got a lot to answer for. I think they could have, if we had a independent media, this crisis would have been over about 2.5 years ago. So, I appreciate your points over the other side of the room. I'm telling you, there is censorship, it's going on, and it's disgusting. got trying to come through, the online harm safety bill, all that kind of stuff. It is dangerous and it is taking you down a road. I'm not saying that this government is tyrannical, they might be. But what I'm saying is, all these bills that they're going to try and put through, they put in place the mechanisms for a tyrannical government to come in and take advantage of those laws. So we should never ever bring those laws in.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Matt. Very, very much appreciated. I just want to say that the purpose of this evening obviously is to unearth these things and to point out that this is not a panel of conspiracy theorists. Mark has been running ITN, Sky News, Matt is a respected footballer, Godfrey Bloom was an MEP for 10 years. And on this side, they're also not conspiracy theorists. Mike is an architect, David Charalambous is an expert on psychology, and he talks about psychological practices, and Gloria Moss was a professor at the university. So I'm also a local councillor, and none of us are conspiracy theorists. And the purpose of tonight, which is to unearth what is actually happening in our society, and present it to people who've been under the influence of what Mark and Matt has been saying, namely the BBC and the orthodox media. And this is why we want to set up an independent channel to present what is actually going on in our society. Right, the next person who's going to speak, this is Professor Sleepeasy. University.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce myself. As the Chair has told us, I am Professor Sleepeasy from Cambridge University. Now, as you know, universities play a pivotal role in our society as educators and also as employers of academics, including vice-chancellors, whose special skills are recognised in salaries exceeding £500,000 per annum. So it is critical to keep these institutions alive. And here in Britain, since government funding to universities has more than halved in the last 14 years, we encourage our academics here at Cambridge University to reach for the stars and to ensure that Cambridge remains viable to continue educating and shaping the minds of current and future generations. And we are very proud here at Cambridge that all of our professors will bring in funding of at least £200,000 per annum. And much of their work is centred on extremely important subjects, as I'm sure you will all agree today. So just to give you a glimpse this evening. So one of the areas that our academics look after is the safety of our citizens. And one of our professors, originally hailed from the Netherlands, he's now investigating how an online game that he has created can actually trigger mental antibodies that will arm players against disinformation. And this vital research, I'm sure you will agree, is funded by the Department for Homeland Security in the US and the Behavioural Insights team, which my colleague David here mentioned earlier, in Britain. And incidentally, all these examples I'm giving you tonight are not fiction. They're actually real research projects. A second stream of research comes from government research grants. And several of our academics have been successful competitive rounds of applications. Now, one is, let me look at my notes here, yes, one is Professor Coffin, who won an Economic and Science Research Council, that's the ESRC, government grant for a project entitled Learning to Like Robots. Now, another professor, Professor Vapid, yes, Professor Vapid, he won a substantial grant for research on low-carbon trade opportunities. And I've only got time to mention a few tonight. Professor Globalizer, he won a project entitled Attracting International Students to the UK. Yes, having a high percentage of overseas students may exclude UK students from our doors, but as you may know, overseas fees are twice those that we secure for domestic students, and you will appreciate that the university must keep afloat in order to carry on its important mission. Now, the third area of research that I'd like to draw to your attention this evening is thanks to the ongoing support of the Hilda and Will Gates Foundation, which is funding a very large number of scholars here at our University of Cambridge, science professors, as well as building projects right across the campus. Now, initiatives such as these ensure the viability of Cambridge, allowing our academics to continue their good work. We must, however, be ever vigilant. One of our world-renowned biochemistry professors, an expert on aluminium, was called out for misinformation in his claims that aluminium in vaccines could be toxic to human health. He had brought in over £2 million in funding during his career with us, but we had to, I'm sure you'll appreciate, we had to react quickly and take down his funding website. And very regrettably, he had no option but to resign. And when another professor, professor this time of ethics, refused to conform to the vaccine mandate in 2021, we had to regrettably let her go. And yes, there was a third case, which involved a professor of management and marketing who undertook research on a very human and motivational form of leadership that engages with people on an individual basis and grows their confidence, talents, and provides intellectual stimulation. Now, what this professor's research clearly revealed was how this human, very humane form of leadership could boost productivity, mental well-being, and motivation in a way that the authoritarian style that is present in much of our senior management team cannot. So we had to stop her from fulfilling a commission to write an article about her research for the main newspaper for universities globally. If we hadn't stopped her, her article on best practice leadership would have exposed us as the worst kind of leaders, and the university's reputation would have suffered. We had a bit of bother with this professor because she stated that stopping her article breached her academic freedoms, and she maintained that academic freedoms were absolutely essential in guaranteeing the impartiality of a university's work. Well, we got around this by claiming over an extended period of time that the timing of her article was not right, and the fight was pursued into the courts. And, well, if you would like to read more about this, you can read about it in this absolutely dreadful book called The Dark Side of Academia, How Truth is Suppressed, which I regret to say is available and also on Amazon. Moving on swiftly. assesses the value of the research done in all the universities of this country. And in the most recent exercise, they done that the only articles, peer-reviewed articles that they would consider, we're talking articles reviewed by peers, very learned peers, and they said that the only articles that the government would consider, and all these articles would attract funding, the only articles they would consider were those articles published in the so-called top journals. Yes, there's a league table of journals, as there is for everything else in our world today. And the highest ranking journals are the 4-star journals. And I'm very proud to say that a number of our fine academics here at Cambridge published many articles in 4-star journals. So just to give you a flavour of some of this exciting work, I'm going to give you the absolute verbatim titles of these articles. So sit tight. Here's the first one. Knowledge leadership and the mobilisation of management research becoming the object of knowledge. I'm sure you'll all be rushing off to read that one. Here's another one. The nature and transformation of corporate headquarters, a review of recent literature and a research agenda. That was co-authored by a learned colleague from our institution, together with one from Oxford University. And here's the third title, again in a 4-star journal. High-flying business schools, working together to address the impact of management education and research on climate change. So I'm very proud of these contributions. And yes, you might be thinking there are voices, including the voices of very senior editors of medical journals such as the Lancet, the British Medical Journal, the New England Medical Journal, who have thrashed the value of peer review. And I even recall a Nobel Prize winner, Sidney Brenner, who described peer review as a completely corrupt system. I even read recently an article in the thinking man's newspaper, The Guardian, recounting how the man behind the whole edifice of peer review was Robert Maxwell. Well, with fake news and disinformation rampant and people questioning mainstream narratives, it is now more important than ever for higher education to double down on dissent and wrong thinking and to ensure that the correct, single worldview prevails. I'm sure you will agree with that. Now, we're coming to the end of our time. I just want to highlight the second area that we are extremely proud of here at Cambridge University. And it is, of course, our membership of the WEF, Global University Leaders Forum. Yes, the WEF, the World Economic Forum, is, as we know, the Davos-based group led by Klaus Schwab that advocates for the Great Reset, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, that includes important initiatives such as the Internet of Things, AI, transhumanism, and the WEF tell us on many occasions that people will end up owning nothing, but nevertheless be completely happy. So the WEF, Global University Leaders Forum, includes, apart from Cambridge University, which I'm proud to lead, it includes some of the world's leading universities. For example, from Britain, there's Cambridge, there's Oxford, and from the US, there are a very large number of Ivy League universities, including Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. And this forum is something we're very proud of because it affords valuable opportunities to pilot educational modules and joint research to ensure that we have a coherent source of truth across the university establishment. like to learn more about the work of universities and the WEF, you can look on the WEF website and find an article written in 2020, I think it was, by a senior professor from Oxford University, Pro-Vice Chancellor for External Affairs, no less, as well as one from Queensland, in which they expressed the view that the role of teaching and research is to, and I quote, produce models and policies to assist the Great Reset. So, Cambridge University is dedicated, as you can see, to keeping education alive. And in doing this, we must safeguard the well-being and safety of our staff and students. And this is one of the reasons why we used prevent legislation to shut down, very recently, a talk on the scientific importance of free speech. That was the title of the talk, the scientific importance of free speech. That was due to be given to the Libertarian Society by a psychology lecturer. But the talk was deemed high risk, since it could have caused disruption. So, bringing this to an end, I can do no better, really, than to quote the wise words of Jacinda Ardern. Only a few weeks ago, and some of you, I'm sure, will have heard her speech to the United Nations, in which she said, "We must be ever alert to misinformation that could be used," these are her words, "as weapons of war to cause chaos. And it is only by being alert that top universities like Cambridge can continue to offer valued education to present and future generations. And of course, we support the proposition that there is absolutely no censorship in universities today." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sleepy from Cambridge University. That was extremely interesting. And I hand over now to Godfrey Bloom, who knows a great deal about the World Economic Forum. And over to you.
Good evening, everybody. I just sort of making some notes there as the previous speakers have gone through, and just thought I might just tell you a little bit about my experiences. Well, taking back, if I may, to 1963, when as a young fellow, as a schoolboy, I used to wander across the Tower Bridge to watch the speakers on the free speech corner of Tower Hill, Speaker's Corner there, which Lord Soper used to speak at every lunchtime. And he used to be quite an interesting fellow. I didn't agree with most of what he said, but he was an inspiring speaker. And the concept of free speech then was sort of drilled into me. I couldn't be more about 13 or 14. But when I got a little bit older, I went up to Hyde Park Corner to listen to the speakers there. And what was particularly interesting about the speakers at Hyde Park Corner, they could attract quite big crowds in those days, and they would there'd be people from all over the world. There'd be people from all over the world watching the speakers just stand on a box with maybe one, maybe two policemen, no more. And they found it was fascinating. They came from countries where they didn't have free speech. And at Hyde Park Corner in those days, in the late 1960s and early 70s, the whole concept of Speaker's Corner was that you could say exactly what you liked. Whatever you liked, as long as you weren't inciting violence, anything went. All right? And people stood awestruck that that could happen, and that could be so. And that was wonderful. Fast forward until just a couple of years ago, when I saw a Christian padre arrested for quoting the Bible. That's how far we have come. That's how far, with moronic policemen standing round, arresting him and letting people reading from anything else that they want to do, the Quran, for example, which, funnily enough, says a lot of the same things as the Bible in certain parts, we're allowed to get away with that. Now, if you can't quote the Bible, if you, in a Christian country, at Hyde Park Corner, I think we've come to a very sorry pass. It's a very, very sad thing, in my view. And the fact that it can happen is because we have a politicised police force. And if you look at what they actually get taught at police college these days, you'll see exactly why that is. Now, a few years ago, I was invited to speak to the Cambridge University Conservative Association. And I went there and gave a speak on libertarianism, in point of fact. And a year later, I was invited back to speak at their dinner. The theme of the speech after dinner was going to be the government of Lord Salisbury in the 1890s, which Clement Attlee reckoned was the most successful Conservative government that we've ever had. I don't think anybody would possibly suggest that isn't so, especially today. It was a wonderfully successful government. I thought it was very interesting because if you look at Lord Salisbury's quotation, he was a libertarian, funnily enough. A lot of the stuff he did was very, very libertarian. And 2 days before I was due to get there, I was deplatformed. It was Robinson College, and they were very clever. They didn't censor me. They didn't say, Mr. Bloom can't come and speak. They said to the Conservative Association, you have to make sure there's enough security there to defend the students. What they thought I was going to do, I really can't say. But they wanted, they said, and of course then the Conservative Association, they got a quotation from G4 or somebody, or Securic or something, whatever it was, and it was £4,000 or £5,000, which blew it out of the water. But of course the Conservative faculty, the faculty of Robinson College said, oh, we didn't deplatform Mr. Bloom, we didn't say he couldn't come. All we said was that the Conservative Association would have to make it secure for our students, and so we asked them to pay for the security. Well, that's as good as cancelling. That's censorship. That's censorship. So I was censored off. It was the same thing when I went to Stirling University in the frozen north, and I went up there to give a lecture on how Scotland could be comfortably independent if they adopted Austrian school economics. Oh, no, that's far too tough for the Scots up there, so I was deplatformed there. We had to find another venue, which of course was a campus university, cut it down by half, cut the audience down by half. I was deplatformed at Durham University. I can't remember why. I must tell you this, at Scotland University, why did they deplatform me at Stirling University? And do you know what the answer was? We didn't know what he was going to say. So I was censored before I opened on. Then it was Somerville College, when somebody said, who was a libertarian, they said, I'd like Dr. Bloom to come and speak to us. I thought this was top stuff, because it was like turning into White's Club. Now, I felt too common to get into White's Club. But Somerville's College for not letting me speak there was because I wasn't a proper chap. So, obviously, I'm not a proper chap. And so, there was no reason given at all, I just wasn't allowed to speak there. And so it goes on, you know, the list goes on and on. I've spoken at Cambridge Uni and I've spoken at the Oxford Union, that the unions haven't given me a problem. It's when speaking at the colleges, and it's sometimes started by the faculty, and it's sometimes started by the NUS, who get the ball rolling. Now, the motion, let's just have a look at the motion here, because what we're actually looking at, do we have censorship in the UK? And we've talked a lot about government, or some of the opposition there, or proposers have talked about that. It is as simple as that, is it? It isn't really as simple as that. It's not to do with the government. It's to do with the whole deep state machinery. And sometimes the Americans get these things so right, don't they? Deep state, what a wonderful expression that is, because I think it sums it up for all of us. Deep state. And the government can actually pressure in a million ways. The establishment can pressure in a million ways. So, for example, just chucking them around. Climate change, for example. As soon as the older members will remember David Bellamy and Joe Ball. They were just a minute. No, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has got absolutely nothing to do with the weather. We're all going to go on deck, so we'll leave it at that. instead they brought in a man, Roger Harrowin, who was an activist. He's not a scientist, he's just an activist, a green activist, and he's been there almost up until just the last year. So all these little things go together. And then you find Classic FM, if you listen, I used to listen to Classic FM. You would be stunned at how much money they get from government for those government statements. Well, it doesn't matter what it's about, whether it's about COVID, whether it's about getting jabbed, whatever it happens to be, that's a very big budget. So they virtually bought Classic FM, lock, stock and barrel, so they could turn that particular tap off. We don't get anybody who can counter-argument. It has to be, I mean, I've been taken down by Twitter, and I've been taken down by Facebook, because of all the very wealthy oligarchs in the world only need a nudge from government, and of course all governments are saying the same thing. You never get a balanced approach, and of course somebody mentioned the BBC Charter, and the BBC Charter is to inform and entertain. It does neither. It does neither. It's repeat after repeat after repeat, if you look through it, just repeats. And of course it doesn't inform. Otherwise we were being told that it's not a vaccine, it's experimental spike protein therapy, which is, but don't call it a bloody vaccine! It's not a vaccine! And that word should be got rid of immediately. That should be censored off. Let me censor that word off vaccine. Not a vaccine. Another word I'd like to censor off, of course, is free. Free. Oh, we believe in free this and free that, and it's free at the point of delivery. It's free, free, free. No, let's change that to taxpayer funded, because that's the truth about it. The government doesn't make money. It's taxpayer funded. So let's have that phrase stopped. So we stop this drip, drip feed all the time of propaganda. Propaganda brings me on to Joseph Goebbels. I decided that it might be a good idea if I looked out and found out how it was done. So I looked at his biography, and he's basically, to paraphrase what he said, first of all, you have to instill fear in the population. You must instill fear. That's primarily the first thing that you do. Then you must have one message. You must have one message. Doesn't matter how absurd it is, you have one message, which appeals to emotion. You will get nowhere, Goebbels said, if you try and appeal to fact. Fact is no good. It doesn't motivate humankind. Fact is something that maybe a small percentage of the population, 15 or 20% of the population, are interested in. Everybody here tonight is interested in fact. You are one of the 20%. Everybody else is not. They are interested in emotion. And this is what drives people, and this is the problem. And this is the problem you have turning around. If you ask the man on Cap the Monographs how the war between the Russian Federation, see nothing about it. Now, I'm not making a case for the Russian Federation. I'm not making a case for anybody. What I'm saying is, shouldn't we have a balance if the BBC is going to inform and entertain? Shouldn't there be a balance? But they closed Russia Today down, so we're only hearing one voice, and they closed down Russia Today and said, oh, well, that's the voice of the Russian government. Well, what's the bloody BBC? If that's not the voice of the British government. So we're not getting a balanced thing. So people who are masked, they cover their face with masks, some of them still are with a mask all over their face, double jab, quadruple jab, terrified of COVID with a 99.9% recovery rate, totally relaxed about a nuclear war. No one wants a nuclear war. Presumably they think it's a 99.9% recovery rate from a nuclear war. Or you could have a booster against it. It's got to be the same message, and it appeals to the emotion. But, he said, and this is the key thing Goebbels said, dissent is not allowed. You're not allowed dissent because the man in the pub who reads the Daily Express view, he gets the BBC view and everything, he gets the Sky view and everything, which is the same message all the time. Now, that man could actually listen to somebody articulate putting another side of the case. Somebody like Piers Corbyn, I can see lurking over there. He should be on. Professor Plimer from Australia should be put on to have a look at the other side. So you've got people, people who actually believe there's a climate emergency. bloody hell, 30 years I've been listening to this. 30 years without a climate emergency. But who do we get advocating it? We get the bloody Swedish doom goblin telling us so. We don't get doom. We get that funny little girl. And we get Mad King Ludwig of Bavaria, who's now Charles III. I don't know what happens to Charles's head if you're Charles #1. They can knock a couple of things off there, in my view. So, you know, we're just not getting, we're not getting any truth, we're not getting any balance. It's covert censorship, it's censorship by oppression, it's censorship by omission all the time. And of course, it's not just here, it's in America all the time. I visited America quite a lot. It's just the same there. I was doing a podcast thing with in Pennsylvania thing the other night, and somebody was complaining on the podcast thing that their daughter had been on a Monday. This is not a state school, this is a private school, to be frightened to death about climate emergency. He's paying money for that. He'd be bloody hell homeschooling for me straight away, that would be. So we're just not getting the balance. We're not getting the balance, and we do bring some of this on ourselves, if you don't mind me suggesting it. We do bring some of this on ourselves, don't we? If you pay the BBC, you are covered. Right? If you pay, if you haven't cancelled your banker's order and you haven't stopped sending your check, you are responsible. So if you are anybody in this room, stop it. And if we all stopped it, something will be done. Cognitive dissonance, which is a fascinating thing. My wife is a medic, and she can't understand it either. She did her dissertation to qualify on actually the long-term use of masks, believe it or not, based on how dangerous they were. So she's never worn a mask, I've never worn a mask, we don't bother, and incidentally when lockdown came along, we built a micro park on my landing in East Yorkshire, and half the village turned up every Friday night here to see it. Take the grip, they need to get rid of Mark Rutte in Holland, they need to get rid of Macron, they need to get rid of Trudeau. If these people aren't there, they can't impose WEF strategy upon us. You will own nothing and you'll be happy. At the moment, they're working really hard to make sure you own nothing. I don't think we're going to be happy.